Hey folks, Dan Gunther here, bringing you my review of Season 2, Episode 7 of The Mandalorian, Chapter 15, The Believer. As usual, a warning for spoilers. If you've not seen the episode, you may not want to watch this video. So this episode sees the Mandalorian and his gang of Boba Fett and Fennec Shand teaming up with Bill Burr's character from last season, Mayfeld. You may remember him from the Prison Break episode last season. My favorite episode of that season, I think, by the way. And spoiler alert for my views on this episode, I think this one is my favorite of this season, maybe of the series so far. I really enjoyed this episode. Which is interesting because it's very different from usual Mandalorian episodes. For one thing, there was no Baby Yoda in it whatsoever, which I think that's the first episode to make this claim. Even the premiere episode had Baby Yoda right at the very end. So interesting that one of the most important aspects of the show to me is missing in this, but I still really loved this episode. At the end of the previous episode, Grogu, Baby Yoda, was of course taken by Moff Gideon's forces, and now the Mandalorian is trying to get him back. So he needs Bill Burr's character as a former Imperial sharpshooter to be able to access an Imperial base to get the information on where to find Moff Gideon's ship. So there's this big, long, convoluted plan. They hijack a shipment of explosives going into this base, but all of the other transports get blown up by what they call pirates, but to me seem more like maybe freedom fighters for this planet, since they're so intent on blowing up the shipment rather than stealing it. But they manage to fight them off until all hope seems to be lost. And then we get this amazing scene where a bunch of TIE fighters come in to save them. And the triumphant music and the cheering for the stormtroopers who are kind of saving them on the other side of this bridge as well makes for a really interesting flipping of the narrative that we usually see where, you know, the Empire is the enemy and all of this stuff. And we get to see kind of the other side of that. We're really happy to see the stormtroopers and the TIE fighters. And all of this fits in, I think, with the theme of the episode, which they talk about kind of moral relativism. Bill Burr's character, for example, says that, you know, the New Republic, the Empire, it's all the same. You know, people want to be free and they're being led by other groups from faraway places. It's kind of an indictment of colonialism, interestingly enough. But then by the end of this episode, that moral relativism is kind of shaken up a bit when we see Bill Burr's reaction to the plans of this, you know, Empire remnant. And you know, Operation Cinder was an operation that he was a part of that saw, you know, scores of people killed, innocent people. And the Imperial officer in this episode says what they're planning will make that pale in comparison, which sets Mayfeld off, and he kills the guy and puts them in some pretty dire straits for a few moments. But it's a really interesting episode. I love the psychology of it. I love the characters. There's some really interesting things that happen in the episode, but mostly just on a character level, not necessarily big picture level, if that makes sense. Part of the episode also talks a little bit about the kind of pushing the line and going over a line and being willing to compromise the rules that you've set out for yourself. And we see that play out in this episode where, you know, the Mandalorian isn't supposed to take off his helmet, or he's not supposed to show his face. Not clear what the rule is, as Mayfeld says. He wears Imperial armor instead of his Mandalorian helmet. Is that breaking the rules? It's, you know, it's kind of unclear. Mandalorian doesn't really say much on that issue. But then later in the episode, when it comes down to it, when he's at a computer terminal that has to scan his face, that part didn't really make a ton of sense to me. The security on these seems pretty lax, but we'll put that aside. He takes his helmet off in the presence of others and allows the computer to scan his face. So we're seeing the lengths to which he is willing to go to save Grogu from the Imperials. And at the same time, you know, playing with that line of what's right and what's wrong. And I think also his experience with Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorians earlier in the season has kind of made him aware that his way, the way, might not be the only way. And I think he's a little willing to compromise on that. You know, when pushed to extremes, this still isn't something he's obviously comfortable with. This is something that's been ingrained into him his entire life. And, that moment when he takes off the helmet is so meaningful. It's only the second time we've seen his face in the whole series, and really the first time that he himself has taken off the helmet. IG-11 did it in the previous seasons. So another instance where he was willing to compromise a little bit when IG-11 says, "I'm not a person," right? So, we've seen him playing with that line before, but this is the first time that he's really fully crossed it, if he's to be believed in last season when he said he's never taken off his helmet in the presence of others or have had it taken off. So it's a really fascinating moment for this character, and I think Pedro Pascal played it brilliantly. I also want to call out Richard Brake's turn as the Imperial officer that sets Mayfeld off. Incredible performance. I was really creeped out by this guy, and really great to see him play this terribly creepy character. It was really well done. And then no review of this episode would be complete without talking about the final scene, which is just brilliant, where the Mandalorian contacts Moff Gideon and parrots back to him the exact phrasing, the exact thing that Gideon said to him at the end of last season. It's a brilliant scene. I can't even remember the words, but it was so beautiful. My wife Nikki was just grinning the whole time through that scene because it's so brilliant. And yeah, Moff Gideon looks disconcerted. He's worried about what the Mandalorian's going to do. So, of course, this is all going to come to a head in this week's episode, the season finale already of season 2, which is hard to believe. It's gone by so quickly, but it really turned into a really incredible season with, a bit of a shaky start in my opinion. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first few episodes, but since then, it's just the last few episodes have been incredible. And this episode, I think, like I said, is just probably my favorite episode of the series so far. It was incredibly written and incredibly directed. Kudos. So yeah, really can't wait to see where this is all going for the final episode of the season. I will, of course, be doing a review of it. Join me here for that. But I want to hear from all of you. What did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks especially to the Patreon supporters for all of their help in bringing these episodes to you. Thank you so much. I could not do it without you. To everyone else, again, watching these videos is the best thing you could possibly do for me. I want you all to take care of yourselves. Have a great week. And I will see you in the next episode here on Kertrats Productions, which will be a deep dive into the Easter eggs from Terra Firma Part 1, the 9th episode of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. So I hope you're enjoying that show as well. I certainly have been, and I'll see you all here for that video. Take care, and may the Force be with you.